Okay, now we know that government is talking a lot about e-invoice, and I personally think that e-invoice is a good thing that can help to minimize the leakage of taxes. Leakage in the sense like people don't declare the income, or they make false claims of expenses. And those days, I get example, even like they say, if you buy a car, right, let's say the car is 50,000 and the loan they only give you 90%, so you're supposed to fork out 5,000 deposit, 45,000 is the loan. But those days we falsify the record. We will say that the car is 60,000, and then using 60,000 you borrow 90%, you got 54,000. Is enough to cover the 50k of the car. In fact, you can get back some extra money back. So things like that has been going on, and now the fact that government is moving into e-invoice, it can actually help to resolve a lot of these issues. Now, e-invoice is not something new. In fact, countries like Vietnam, they have been using e-invoice for many more years before us, okay? But now, the implementation of e-invoice can be so much easier because of how IT has advanced, so it's really not so scary. Now, before we even go in, I just want to let you know that our study here is very surface. We are not going too much in detail, but it's good enough for you to get a concept that you can even go out there and show to people like, oh, okay, that's what you're expecting, okay? Now, the law says that under Section 82 is a new section. A person shall, in a year of assessment, issue electronic invoice for every transaction for goods sold or services performed for that year of assessment, okay? Now, this electronic invoice, I will come into explaining to you what exactly is that, okay? And then Section 82C sub 2 says that Director General will actually issue a guideline to a specific person about issuing the e-invoice, the condition. So the Inland Revenue will issue guideline. And through the guideline, then they will tell you like, okay, these are the people, what you must do, and so on, okay? Now, in order for an invoice to be regarded as an e-invoice, it has to be validated by the Director General. That means you have to go through the Inland Revenue system. So please understand that e-invoice is not invoice in soft copy. So some people think, oh, PDF invoice, no, it's not a PDF invoice. It's an invoice that you have been validated. That means the Inland Revenue has a record of this invoice, okay? So they have a record. Now, there's also a rule about issuing consolidated e-invoice. Now, consolidated e-invoice is actually meant for cases like as a business, you didn't issue e-invoice for your individual transaction. So what you do is you lump all the invoices together and you process it as a consolidated e-invoice, okay? Now, why do we need e-invoice? I'll come to that shortly, okay? Now, basically for e-invoicing, the provisions of Personal Data Protection Act will not apply. So that means you are allowed to ask for information from your customers, like give me your tax identification number, and things like that. Then they cannot come and say, hey, how can you ask for my personal data? So things like that. So the processing of all this information will not contravene Personal Data Protection Act, okay? Now, and if you fail to comply with e-invoice requirement, the standard penalty will apply. So again, the fine is 200 to 20,000, 6 months jail or both, okay? Now, this is a big thing. So a lot of people are like, wow, will it affect me? Now, the implementation deadlines are like this. So if the taxpayer has a revenue that is more than 100 million, you're supposed to implement this as soon as 1st August 2024. So you say, okay, how do I know what's 100 million? Now, the rule is based on the audited financial statement of 2022. Says, oh, I'm a new business. I just started in 2023. I don't have 20. Okay, that means you cannot comply with the first condition because you don't even have a 2022 accounts. Okay, now again, if your sales revenue is more than 25 million but not more than 100, your implementation date is January 2025. So they give a couple of months more time for you. So they let the big boys come first. Now, then they say all others. That means the smaller one and those that you only start business in 2023. So you don't have a 2022 accounts, right? So you will fall under the all other category. So that's why those who start 2023 onwards, your implementation date will all be July 2025. Okay? So what's an e-invoice? Now, it's actually a digital representation of transaction between the seller and the buyer that is formatted in a machine readable manner. So it's something like XML, JSON, and it's not your PDF, it's not your JPEG. Okay. Now there are people that they're exempted from implementing e-invoice. For example, the ruler, the government, the state government. Okay, all those facilities is provided by the government. All right. The consular officers and even individuals that if you're not doing business, you don't actually have to follow e-invoice. Okay. Now, and there are some transactions that e-invoice is not required. Okay, so let me give you the idea of why e-invoice is going to be so scary. Like why government can use this as a powerful weapon to fight against tax evasion. Okay, if let's say you run business, if you're a business, okay, come here. If let's say you're a business and you buy, for example, your raw material from ABC, okay, and assuming that the cost of the raw material is 70,000. Now, technically, ABC, let's say ABC Central Berhad, when they send you this particular transaction, it will be in e-invoice. Okay, now because it's in e-invoice, the detail of this transaction would have been captured in the IRB system. So the IRB system will be able to tell that ABC has got the sales. Okay, that ABC has got the sales of 70,000, and at the same time, let's say you has got the purchases of 70,000. Okay. Now, if you don't operate e-invoice, there's going to be a problem. So let's say, for example, you go and get some service from Alim, and that there's no e-invoice, for example. Okay. Now, a lot of things we don't know how they're going to develop, so we must wait for more and more development from the government. But as now, this is the idea, okay. So let's say Alim has provided you the service and charge you 2,000 ringgit normal invoice. Okay, that means it's not e-invoice, I just issue a normal invoice and give it to you. Now you see, because this is not an e-invoice, you will have problem that you will be unable to claim the expense deduction of 2,000 to Alim because there's no e-invoice. Now that's a problem. Okay. Now, of course, I think some of you will start to say, hey, that's so unfair, you know, I really buy something, how come I can't? Well, there is a solution, which is for you to have a self-bill e-invoice. We'll come to that later. Which means you will inform the government that, oh, I bought something from this person and then they didn't give me an e-invoice. That's why now I'll issue an e-invoice from my end. That means government will now know that Lim has got income of 2,000 ringgit. So can you imagine those people who earn commission and has never declared their income will now be easily caught by the government. Okay, so that's why e-invoice is so powerful. So to you, you're going to say, I don't do business, you know, all these. No. In the future, when you want to claim tax relief, you need e-invoice. You say you You attend a course, where's the e-invoice? You say you go to hospital, where's the e-invoice? If you say that you have purchased computer, where's the e-invoice? All this has to go through the e-invoice system to be verified. So in the future, if you say, oh, I don't have e-invoice, that means you will not be able to claim your tax relief. So in the future, I believe even the systems is so efficient that the government don't even need you to fill in how much is your revenue that year. I mean, I'm just guessing, like they can do to the extent that the money that you earn is automatically reflected in the system because it's all captured by the e-invoice. I mean, that's what we see, because they're using a system that you can choose not to declare your income, but if that side won't get a deduction, they won't go ahead, right? So they will insist that you have to issue so that they get a deduction. So you see how the systems work. Okay, come back to this. Now, there are some transactions where e-invoice will not be needed, okay, including the self-bill e-invoice, like paying salary does not need e-invoice, okay, pension, alimony, distribution of dividend in some specific circumstances, they don't need, zakat, they don't need, the contract value for buying securities don't need, and selling share of company incorporated in or outside Malaysia is not listed, they don't need, except for the cases where disposer is company, LLP, trust, and cooperative society, because that one they have to be caught under the capital gains tax lah. So that's why there's a requirement there. So what exactly is e-invoice? Now, the government gave us two systems. One is called the MyInvoice portal, which you can go and test it out. So now they have this testing system. I will show you very quickly after this, okay? The other one is you go through API. So basically, the accounting system would have been integrated with the income tax, so that from there, they will be able to like validate the invoice without you going through anything with the government. Because go through government, a lot more information you have to fill in. Okay, I'll just show you later what I mean by that. Now, the taxpayer can claim tax deduction or personal relief without the e-invoice or not. So eventually, the IRB will only grant deduction when they have e-invoice. Eventually. Now, we do not know until when government will tolerate that. So there will come to a point, maybe government will just say, okay, this year onwards, no more. And then that's it. That's the end game. Okay. Now, is e-invoice only applicable for transaction in Malaysia? Well, not really. So if let's say you import goods or services from overseas, you still got to have an e-invoice to grant the deduction for your business, right? So then what you can do is you can go for a system called self-billed e-invoice, okay? Now, a self-billed e-invoice is a mechanism for you to use it to prove your income or to prove your expense. Like I said just now, if you buy from Lim and he does not issue e-invoice and you have a problem that you can't claim the expenses, right? So one way we could overcome that is we can go through a self-billed e-invoice, and that allows your business to claim something. And when you do that, indirectly you expose Alim to let income tax know, hey, you know, you've got money you never declared. So that's why it's the systems that allow us to track and detect if there's anything missing that the government realize that you didn't declare your tax. Okay, so all this is example of what buyer can do to issue a self-billed e-invoice, like when you make payment to agent, your dealer, when you buy goods from overseas for profit distribution, e-commerce transactions, even the paying out, betting or winning from gambling. Okay, so transactions with individuals that they don't do business, like rental from a person. He's not a businessman, he does not issue, but you're paying rental, so you can go for self-billed e-invoice. Okay, so these are just some of the example. Now, just now I did mention to you that there are people, maybe they're small business, they're not so capable of doing all these e-invoice things. So what they do is they are looking for maybe simplicity or leniency. Let's say I sell curry laksa. Every day people come and eat curry laksa. I don't think they will want to use the curry laksa bill for tax deduction. Most of them could be end user. Then how? Then instead of me issuing e-invoice on the like a transaction basis, I could just accumulate them, consolidate them, and issue the full amount in one go. So you won't have the individual detail. So that's what consolidated e-invoice mean. Okay, but you see, there are some transactions that the government will not allow you to have a consolidated e-invoice, and you can see these are mainly things that government will be very interested to know. If you buy a car, so that means the moment you buy a car, now government will know who buys a car. You book air ticket, because when you can travel, you must be rich, right? You buy luxury item. A lot of things we still pending government's guideline, like what's the threshold to be called luxury, all that. But we know that that's the direction. Okay, constructions contract, construction material, gambling gains, commission. These are all has to be issued individually. Okay, so the timing. Now, for consolidated e-invoice, you still have to do it monthly. So you will stack up everything. And then one go within 7 calendar days after the month end. That means the sales of January, you consolidate by 7 February of the month. The consolidated e-invoice has to be issued. Okay. Now, for self-bill e-invoice, you will latest by the end of the month following the month upon 1, the payment made by the Malaysian purchase, or 2, the receipt of the invoice from the foreign supplier, whichever is earlier. Okay. Now, if you do get foreign income, the recipient also need to issue e-invoice latest by the end of the month following the month of the receipt of the foreign income. Now, these are the little bit about timing issue. Now, when you issue e-invoice, because the invoice has already been validated with the government, the question is, can you make changes? Now, actually, yes, a short window. So it says that once your invoice has been issued, you have to cancel within 72 hours from the time of validation to reissue a new invoice. Now, if 72 hours has passed, the invoice is already issued. Then, if you want to make adjustment, the way is you have to issue a debit note or a credit note to offset or cancel that particular invoice. But if it's within 72 hours, you still can cancel. Then you can do your amendment. But if not, you have to issue a new credit note or debit note to offset the original invoice. Okay. Okay. Now, if you want to try out the e-invoice thing, you can come to you just Google MyInvoice portal, and then you can see that there is a link here. Okay. Now, if your first time, you have to get your account activated. So I have already activated mine. So I'm just going to show you what you have on the screen. Okay, so basically this is my portal. Now you're going to click this and go into pre-production, pre-prod. Now that's how your e-invoice portal looks like. Okay, so you can basically come here like issue an invoice, so you could come up with a document. Now these are the basic steps. So let me hide my video so I can show you everything. Okay, so you have to go through basic information, which they say the internal ID is all generated. Then you have to give the supplier and buyer ID. Now, under your supplier and buyer ID, you basically have to choose your MSIC code. Okay, you know, the business code. And then, I just want to show you testing. And then after that, you have to provide your customer's detail. Like this is the business registration number, your IC. So let's say I'm just going to like simply put a figure lah. So 801001145535, and this is the tax identification number. So if you don't have a proper one, it will not be validated. So you see, I'm just going to key some number over here. You validate, you see the number is invalid. So I'm going to just key in a valid number, and then you will see that it will be able to go through. Okay, so I have key in the correct one that I have clicked validated, and now you can see that they don't show the invalid things. Okay, so I have basically key in some information, and now they will ask you to add the line item. Now this is where it's really a lot of info. You see, you just got to search for what are the items that you're selling. The sell bill are here. Okay, all these things, medical, internet, because this can all be more relevant for relief purpose lah. So it could be like, for example, others. Okay, then your product and so on, then the quantity, and even quantity you have to choose like what is the unit metrics. That itself is so, I mean, the first time can be quite daunting, right? But once you are basically used to your business, you know what exactly that we're used to measure, like kilogram dry weight, or so scary, right? Okay, like kilowatt year, kilowatt hour. Okay, so mile per minute. You know, it's really like, be like, what is all that, right? Okay, let's just take I don't know what's an active unit. So let's say the price is 500, the amount, then discount, taxes, everything. Now let's just add this in. They need me to put in the taxes. So 0 exemption. Why am I not? Please correct the errors. Where are the errors? The text type is required. Oh, sorry, I know why. I need to exempt the value, okay, to show this. Non-taxable. Okay, so let's just add this. Okay, so that's where the line items, if you got how many things you sell, you just got to keep adding, right? And now we will come to the additional information. So a lot of all these things which I don't intend to fill in. Okay, so now they ask you to basically submit this document, and they will ask you to sign in another time to key in your password to basically get it approved. Okay, so I'm going to, and ta-da! So the document is submitted. So that means the income tax has got a verification. You can still download a soft copy record of your e-invoice by clicking this. So you come to this document that we've created. Okay, so this is what you can download, the e-invoice. You could print it out as a copy that you could use. So this is a copy over here. So that is a little bit about e-invoice for you to know. Okay, the last thing here before I finish off this session is another requirement that every taxpayer has to do is to inform the government when they change address. So you need to inform the Inland Revenue that there's a change of new address within 3 months of your change. And again, if you fail to do that, standard penalty applies. Okay, alright, so I finish off the return part. So there's still another part about assessment. So I will leave this assessment to the next video. Alright, so I'm going to stop here. Thank you very much. Bye bye.